The offer she shouldn't have made. The sun was rising over the dusty human colony world of Terra 3, its golden light spilling across the half-broken street markets. Workers were already shouting, trading, arguing, but one figure stood silently near the edge of the crowd. A woman with gray skin, tired eyes, and a child in her arms. She was not human. Her features soft and alien, wide eyes that shimmered faint blue when the light hit them right, and faint markings across her cheeks that glowed whenever she breathed too fast. Her clothes were torn, her voice dry, and her hope almost gone. Her name was Mira, once a teacher on her home planet, now a refugee after the war that had shattered her world. She had crossed half the galaxy searching for work, food, anything to keep her child alive. But every door she knocked on closed the same way, with fear, disgust, or silent refusal. Humans and aliens didn't mix easily here. Not after the wars. By noon, her legs were trembling. Her child's small hand hung weakly from her shoulder. That was when she saw a sign, half-rusted, swinging in the wind. Human engineering and repairs, workers wanted. She hesitated, looking at the building. A small workshop filled with heavy machines and smoke. Inside, a man was working, broad shoulders, oil on his hands, a welding mask resting on his head. His name was Ethan Ward, and everyone in the district knew him. The quiet human who didn't talk much but paid fair wages. Mira walked in slowly, clutching her child. Ethan turned, his eyes narrowing slightly at the sight of her alien face, but he said nothing. "Yes?" he asked, his voice steady but distant. I saw the sign," she whispered. "I need work, any work. Please." He looked her up and down, seeing how weak she looked, how thin her child was. "I don't hire refugees," he said flatly, turning back to his machine. "You people don't last a day here." Mira's breath caught, her heart racing. She stepped forward, desperate. "Please, I'll do anything." He didn't turn, didn't even look at her. "Anything?" he asked quietly, his tone sharp, testing. She swallowed hard, her voice breaking as tears filled her eyes. "On my first day of work, I'll sleep with you," she said suddenly. The words came out trembling, shameful, but full of despair. Her child stirred, half awake, not understanding the words his mother had just said. The workshop fell silent. Only the sound of the cooling engine filled the air. Ethan slowly turned, his expression unreadable. He saw the way her hands shook, the way she looked down in fear and guilt. She wasn't trying to tempt him, she was trying to survive. He walked toward her, slow, heavy steps on the metal floor. Her heart pounded, she expected a shout. A slap, maybe worse, but Ethan stopped right in front of her, looked at her trembling face and spoke quietly. "Take your kid and sit over there," he said, nodding toward the corner. "You'll clean the workshop first. Then we'll see if you can handle the rest." Mira blinked. Stunned, unable to speak, she nodded quickly, whispering, thank you, sir." Ethan turned away again, muttering something under his breath. He didn't say it loud, but she heard it anyway. "No one needs to sell their soul to work here." Outside, the wind howled through the dusty street. Inside, for the first time in days, Mira felt a small spark of safety. But as she looked around the workshop, she didn't notice the shadow behind the glass upstairs. Someone else was watching, recording, listening, waiting to report that an alien refugee had entered a human's territory. And on Terra 3, that was something that could get both of them killed. Whispers in the dust. Mira woke up before sunrise, her child still asleep on the small blanket Ethan had given her. She could hear the machines in the workshop humming softly, and the smell of metal filled the air. For a moment she didn't know where she was, but then she saw the tools, the oil-stained walls, and remembered the human had let her stay. She rose quietly, washed her face with the little water she had, and began cleaning. Every corner of the workshop was dusty, every table covered with metal scraps. She moved carefully, not wanting to make noise. She wanted to prove she could work, that she was worth something. When Ethan came down, he stopped in the doorway. Watching her for a few seconds, he said nothing, but his eyes softened a little when he saw how much she had already done. "You cleaned all that?" he asked, his voice quiet but surprised. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll do more. I promise," and he just nodded, picked up his tools and began working. Hours passed in silence, only broken by the sound of machinery and the child's small laughter when Mira found a piece of wire to turn into a toy. For a few hours it almost felt normal. But outside, things were changing. At the the corner tea stall, two men were talking. "You hear about Ward's workshop?" one said, sipping his drink. "Yeah, they say he hired an alien woman." The other man snorted. "Figures he always was too soft." "Soft? You know what happens if the patrol finds out? Humans aren't allowed to house them without registration." "Let the patrol handle it," the first man said, smirking. "She won't last long anyway." By noon, half the street knew. By evening, the local patrol knew too. And one man among them had been waiting for a reason to go after Ethan Ward for months. Back in the workshop, Ethan noticed Mira's hands trembling as she worked. "Hey," he said, putting down his wrench, "you okay?" She hesitated, then whispered, "People outside. They stare, they whisper," he sighed, wiping his hands. "They'll always whisper. Doesn't matter what you do." "I'm sorry if I caused trouble," she said softly, her eyes wet. "I didn't mean to—" "Stop," he said firmly. "You didn't do anything wrong." That night, he locked the door early. He gave her a small meal, a half loaf of bread and a can of soup. To her, it felt like a feast. Her child smiled for the first time in days. Small teeth flashing in the dim light, Ethan watched them quietly, feeling something in his chest he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't pity, it was something else, something heavier, but then a knock echoed at the door, sharp and hard. Ethan's hand froze mid-air. Another knock, louder this time. Mira's child hid behind her legs, eyes wide. Ethan stood, his jaw tight. "Stay quiet," he whispered, walking to the door. Outside stood three men in patrol jackets. The local enforcers, their leader smirked. "Evening, Ward, got a minute?" Ethan didn't open the door fully. "What do you want?" "Just checking rumors," the man said, pretending to be casual. "Heard you're harboring an alien." "Maybe two." Ethan's voice stayed calm. "You heard wrong." The man's grin widened. "You sure about that?" "We could search, make sure your shop's clean." Behind him, Mira held her breath, holding her child close. One wrong word, one wrong move, and she'd be taken away. Maybe worse. Ethan stared at the patrolman, then said quietly, "Come back with a warrant." He shut the door before the man could reply, the lock clicking loudly. Silence filled the room. Mira's hands shook. Her heart pounding, Ethan turned, his eyes dark and serious now. "They won't stop," he said, voice low. "If they come back, you and the kid will need to hide." For the first time, Mira realized he wasn't just helping her, he was risking everything. The human who refused to be silent, the night dragged on. Heavy and cold, Mira sat in the corner of the workshop, her child asleep in her arms, the dim blue glow of the welding light flickering across her tired face. Ethan worked silently at his table, tools moving fast, sparks jumping like fireflies in the dark. He didn't look at her, but she could feel the storm building inside him. Finally he stopped, setting his tools down. "They'll come again," he said quietly. "Next time they won't just knock." Mira looked up, fear trembling in her eyes. "I can go, before they hurt you." Ethan turned, his eyes sharp. "You go out there. They'll catch you within an hour." "I don't want you in danger because of me," she whispered. "You don't even know me." He stared at her for a long moment, then sighed. "You think I don't remember what hunger looks like? What fear does to people?" She blinked, confused. "You've been hungry?" Ethan smiled bitterly. "Once during the rebellion. Humans were hunted too." He didn't explain more, but the look in his eyes told her enough. Pain, loss, survival. They were things he understood too well. Suddenly, the sound of boots echoed outside again. Ethan's face hardened instantly. "Quick," he said, pulling open a panel behind the tool shelves. "Hide in there. Don't make a sound." Mira grabbed her child and crawled into the narrow space. Heart racing, the panel closed just as the door burst open. 3 patrolmen entered, this time with weapons drawn. "Evening again." "Ward," the leader sneered. "Didn't like your tone earlier." Ethan stood calm, his arms crossed. "Didn't like your questions." The man stepped closer. "Where's the alien?" Ethan didn't flinch. "You see one here?" The patrolman glanced around, his men searching through shelves and toolboxes. "Rumor says you're hiding her," the man said. "Rumor also says you're still one of those war vets who can't follow rules." Ethan smiled faintly. "Rumors say a lot of things." The man's smirk faded, replaced by anger. "You think you're untouchable, Ward?" He stepped closer, jabbing a finger into Ethan's chest. "If we find her, you're done." Ethan's voice dropped low, almost dangerous. "Then you better start searching faster." The patrolman froze for a second. Something in Ethan's tone made even him hesitate. Behind the panel, Mira covered her child's mouth as the little one started to whimper. Tears ran down her cheeks silently, her whole body shaking. After a few tense minutes, one of the men said, "Nothing here." "Boss?" The leader frowned, glaring at Ethan one last time. "You're playing a stupid game. Human." Then they left, slamming the door behind them. Ethan waited a moment before opening the panel. Mira crawled out, her hands trembling. "They'll kill you if they find out," he shrugged. "They already tried once," her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Ethan didn't answer. He just walked to his table and sat down, staring at the glowing ember of the forge. "The war didn't end for people like me," he said quietly. "We just stopped fighting out loud." Mira didn't know what to say. This man, cold, quiet, and alone, had just risked his life for her. Someone from the race humans once called enemies, and now, for the first time, she saw something else in him, something beyond duty or pity. It was defiance, pure and human. Outside, the patrolman stopped at the corner. The leader lit a cigarette, smoke curling in the dark. "Next time," he muttered, "we burn the place down, inside the workshop." Ethan finally looked at Mira and said, "If they come again, we don't hide. We run." Mira nodded slowly, clutching her child close. She didn't know where they would go, but deep inside, she felt something strange, trust. And outside, above the dark colony, the patrol ship circled low, its scanners searching for signs of alien life. It stopped for a moment, then locked onto a faint blue signal coming from Ethan's workshop. The same soft light that shimmered from Mira's skin when she was afraid. When the signal was found, the alarm on the patrol ship beeped once. Faint but sharp, the sensor officer leaned closer, eyes narrowing at the screen. "Sir, we've got a biosignal," he said. The captain turned, frowning. "Species match?" The officer hesitated. "Half match, sir. Humanoid, but readings show luminescent skin traits, likely alien female." The captain grinned coldly. "Location? Sector 9. Inside the old human mechanics workshop." That was all he needed to hear. Within minutes, 4 armored patrol units were heading toward Ethan's district, engines growling through the dark. Inside the workshop, Ethan froze when he heard the faint roar in the distance. He looked out the window and saw the flicker of blue lights in the sky. He didn't speak, but Mira could read the tension in his face. "They're coming," she whispered. Her voice trembling, Ethan nodded slowly, his mind already racing. He walked to the far end of the workshop and pressed a hidden panel. A soft hum filled the room as the wall slid open. Revealing a narrow tunnel leading underground, Mira gasped. You had this prepared?" Ethan gave a small, grim smile. "Old habits." He tossed her a small pack. "Food, water, emergency light. Go now." She clutched her child tighter, eyes wet. "What about you?" "I'll buy time," he said simply, turning back toward the entrance. "No," she cried. "They'll kill you." Ethan glanced at her, his eyes calm but burning with quiet resolve. "I've died once already," he said softly. "This time I'm choosing why." She didn't understand, but she saw the scars on his hands. The faint tattoo on his wrist faded and old, a symbol from the human resistance. He wasn't just a mechanic. He was a veteran from the last human-alien war, the one who fought when everyone else surrendered. As Mira slipped into the tunnel, tears fell silently down her cheeks. She turned one last time and whispered, "Thank you, Ethan." He didn't reply, but when the door closed, he let out a long breath and whispered back, "Stay alive." Moments later, the walls shook as the patrol ships landed outside. The main door burst open, metal cracking under the impact. 10 armored figures entered, weapons raised, lights sweeping across the room. Their captain stepped forward, helmet shining under the workshop lamps. "Ethan Ward," he called out. "You are under arrest for harboring alien fugitives." Ethan stood calmly beside his workbench, hands empty, face emotionless. "Got a warrant this time?" he asked dryly. The captain smirked. "Warrant? We don't need one for your kind." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "Then you're worse than I thought." Without warning, one of the soldiers lunged forward. Grabbing him by the collar, Ethan moved faster, too fast. In a single motion, he twisted the man's arm, slammed him to the floor and grabbed his stun baton. The others raised their rifles instantly. "Stand down." The captain barked, "He's ex-military, aim for his legs." Shots fired, sparks flew, metal shattered. Ethan rolled behind a table, returning fire with the stolen weapon. the room filled with smoke and flashing lights. He fought like a man who had nothing left to lose and everything left to protect. Down below, Mira held her child close as the ground trembled. The boy whimpered. "Mama, what's happening?" She whispered, "The human. He's fighting for us." The tunnel lights flickered, dust falling from above. She wanted to run back, to help, but she knew she couldn't above. Ethan ducked behind a burning machine, his arm bleeding. He grabbed an old plasma torch, switched it on, and hurled it toward the patrolman. The blast lit the workshop like a sunrise. 2 soldiers fell, others staggered back for a moment. Ethan stood tall in the smoke, his silhouette framed in blue fire. "You think humans forget how to fight?" He shouted, his voice echoing through the workshop. Then the explosion hit, a blinding flash that tore through the roof. When the dust settled, the patrolmen were gone, the ship engines fading into the distance. But so was Ethan. Far below, Mira felt the ground go still. She looked up through a crack in the ceiling, tears falling silently. "Please, let him be alive," she whispered, holding her child tight, and somewhere in the smoke above, a faint heartbeat still echoed beneath the ruins. The desert of ash. The tunnel stretched for miles beneath the colony. Mira walked barefoot on the cold metal floor. Her child asleep in her arms, the air was heavy and warm, filled with the distant sound of the world collapsing above them. Every step she took echoed like a heartbeat. Slow and lonely, she didn't know where the tunnel led. Ethan hadn't told her, but she trusted him, trusted that even in death, the human's plan would guide her. Hours later, she reached the exit, a small hatch that opened into the wasteland. When she pushed it open, hot air rushed in. The sky outside was gray. The ground cracked and red like dried blood. Terath 3's desert stretched endlessly before her. And in the distance, black smoke rose from where the workshop once stood. Mira's heart ached. She wanted to go back to search, to find any sign of Ethan. But she knew if the patrol was still there, they'd find her too, so she turned away, whispering softly, "Forgive me," and walked into the wasteland. For 2 days, she traveled with almost no food. Her child's lips were dry, his eyes half open. She gave him her last drop of water and kept walking. The wind howled and the sand stung her feet. But she didn't stop. Because stopping meant dying. On the 3rd day, she saw lights in the distance. At first, she thought it was a mirage. But as she got closer, she saw tents, vehicles, and flags. Blue and silver with the symbol of a gear and a flame. Humans, but not patrol. These were scavengers, desert workers, outcasts. She stumbled into the camp. Half conscious, 2 men ran forward, catching her before she fell. "Hey, she's got a kid! Get water!" one shouted. They laid her under a tarp, poured cool water on her lips. When she woke up, she found herself looking at another human, older, scarred, and wearing an old military jacket. "You're safe," he said gruffly. "Name's Captain Reddick. Used to serve under Ethan Ward." Mira froze. You knew him?" Reddick's face darkened. Everyone in the resistance knew him. He sat down, lighting a small lamp. "Ward wasn't just a mechanic, miss. He was a commander, a war hero. Last of the Iron Line." Mira blinked, trying to understand. "The Iron Line?" Reddick nodded slowly. "Humans who refused to surrender when the galaxy turned against us. Ward led the final defense at Sol Frontier. When the war ended, he disappeared, said he'd had enough killing." Her throat tightened. "He saved me, and my son." Reddick looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "That sounds like him. He always helped those nobody else would." Mira lowered her eyes, whispering, "He stayed behind to fight. I think he's gone." Reddick's jaw tightened. If Ward's gone, he didn't die easy. That night, the camp stayed quiet. The wind blew dust across the tents, and the humans around her whispered stories of Ethan, how he once faced an entire fleet with a single ship, how he freed prisoners when everyone else had given up. They spoke of him like a legend, a ghost who never stopped fighting. Mira looked at the stars. Holding her sleeping child, she whispered softly, "He saved me because he still believed in something." "Maybe in hope." Reddick approached again, standing beside her. "Listen, if the patrols attacked his workshop, they'll come here next," he said. "We can move you to the old human outpost near the ridge." She nodded quietly. "I'll go wherever you say." Reddick looked toward the burning horizon. "But if Ward survived," he said slowly, "he'll come for you. That man doesn't break promises." And far away, under the ruins of the workshop, a flicker of movement stirred. A broken hand reached through the dust, fingers tightening around a cracked metal floor. Ethan Ward was still alive, and his eyes, once calm and quiet, now burned with the fire of vengeance. The human who wouldn't die dust filled his lungs. Every breath felt like fire, but he was alive. Ethan Ward opened his eyes beneath the twisted metal of what used to be his workshop. His body was covered in bruises. His left arm burned and blood ran down his face. The roof had collapsed, the machines melted, and everything smelled of smoke and death. He tried to move, pain shooting through his side. He gritted his teeth, pushed harder, and the rubble above him shifted with a grinding sound. A beam of sunlight broke through, touching his face. He gasped, air rushed in, and the world came back. He crawled out slowly, every inch a battle outside. The street was empty. Black ash floated in the air like snow. The patrol ship was gone, but the ground was scorched where it had stood. He could still see the footprints, the marks of heavy boots, and drops of alien blood mixed with dust. Mira. He whispered her name through cracked lips. He looked around, searching, but there was nothing, no sign of her or the child. Just silence. He fell to his knees, his fists slamming into the ground. For a moment he let the grief in. Then it turned into anger, sharp and cold. He stood slowly, dragging his broken body back inside what was left of the workshop. Behind the smoke and shattered tools was a sealed locker, old, rusted but strong. He entered a code only his past self would remember. The door clicked open and inside were pieces of armor, weapons wrapped in cloth, and a single dog tag. Commander Ethan Ward, Iron Line. He ran his fingers over the tag. He had buried this part of himself long ago, but now the war had come back, and this time it was personal. He strapped on the old chest plate, wiped the dust off the rifle, and loaded the last of his plasma cartridges. His reflection in the cracked mirror didn't look like a mechanic anymore. It looked like a soldier who had crawled out of hell. He stepped outside again, limping slightly, and stared at the horizon. He knew where the patrol would go, Sector Ridge, the last human outpost still standing in the wasteland. If Mira had survived, that's where she'd be taken. He whispered to the wind, "Hold on," and started walking. Hours passed, the sun burning high. He moved through broken ruins, across dry rivers, through the skeletons of fallen cities. Every step hurt, but pain didn't matter anymore. He had a purpose, he had someone to protect. By nightfall, he reached a burned-out convoy. The vehicles were still smoking. Patrol symbols melted on their sides. Bodies lay everywhere, some human, some alien. He searched quietly until he found one still breathing. A patrol officer, armor cracked, helmet gone. The man looked up weakly, fear in his eyes. You're supposed to be dead." Ethan crouched beside him, voice low and calm. "Where did you take them?" The officer coughed, choking on smoke. "The woman and the child." "To the ridge." Ethan's eyes hardened. "How many guards?" "3 squads. Maybe more." The man gasped. Ethan nodded, stood, and turned away. The soldier whispered, "You can't win alone." Ethan stopped and looked back. "Watch me," he said quietly. He took the officer's transport bike and sped into the desert night. The wind tore at his face, stars shining above like cold fire. Behind him, the wreck burned bright against the dark. Ahead, the lights of the patrol base glowed faintly in the distance. For the first time in years, Ethan Ward felt something powerful inside him again. Not anger, not pain, but purpose. He whispered into the wind. "You hurt what I swore to protect. Now I'll show you what a human really is." And the desert answered with thunder as his bike roared toward the horizon. The human who walked into fire. The night sky burned with storm clouds as Ethan Ward rode across the wasteland. His transport bike howled through the wind, its engine echoing like thunder across the empty plains. Dust and sparks trailed behind him, his armor scorched and his weapon ready. Ahead, in the distance, the faint lights of the patrol base flickered, a fortress of metal and cruelty. He stopped a few hundred meters away, hiding the bike behind a dune. Through his scope, he saw guards on the walls, drones flying in slow circles and the glowing cages where prisoners were kept. And there, in the middle of it all, he saw her Mira chained by the wrist to a post, her child curled beside her. His jaw tightened. He whispered softly, "Hold on, I'm here." He checked his rifle, the old plasma cells humming faintly. Only 4 charges left. It wasn't much, but he didn't need much. He wasn't coming here to survive, he was coming here to end it. The wind rose, carrying dust and lightning. He waited until the first flash of the storm lit the sky, then moved, silent, fast, a shadow between the dunes. He slipped past the first guard without sound. The man barely had time to turn before Ethan's hand covered his mouth and the blade went in. Quick and clean, the body fell quietly, lost in the wind. He climbed the wall next, using the broken railings and cables. His movements were steady, his breathing calm. Every step he took was the same way he used to move during the war. When silence was life and mistakes meant death, inside the base chaos was brewing. The storm knocked out half the lights, the drones flickered, and the patrolmen shouted orders over the comms. Ethan used the confusion like a weapon. He moved from shadow to shadow, disabling cameras, cutting wires, planting small charges from his tool belt. He reached the holding yard, eyes fixed on Mira. She sat trembling, her hands bruised, her face streaked with tears. When she saw him step out of the darkness, her breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. But then she saw his eyes, tired, fierce, alive. "Ethan," she whispered, "you're alive." He smiled faintly. "Didn't plan on dying just yet." He knelt beside the cage, slicing through the locks with a plasma cutter. "Can you walk?" She nodded weakly, clutching her child. "I can try." "Good," he said, "because we don't have much time." A shout echoed from the tower. "Alarm! Section 4, movement detected." Ethan grabbed Mira's hand, pulling her toward the gate. The charges he planted earlier began to beep faintly. He looked back once, then pressed the detonator. The entire western wall exploded in fire and light. Panic spread instantly. Soldiers running, shouting orders. Ethan led Mira through the smoke, covering her with his body as debris rained down. Bullets whistled past. One grazing his shoulder, he didn't stop. Every instinct screamed at him to keep moving. They reached the bike just as another explosion rocked the base. Ethan helped her on, her child clinging to her chest. "Hold tight!" he shouted over the storm. The bike roared to life, flames lighting the sky behind them. They sped through the wasteland as alarms wailed and gunfire faded into the distance. Mira looked back once. The base that had imprisoned her was now burning like a dying sun. She turned to Ethan, tears streaming down her face. "You came back for us," she whispered. He glanced at her, voice low but steady. "I said you'd live. I keep my word." Lightning cracked above them, thunder rolling like drums of war. The storm swallowed their trail, hiding them from the eyes of their enemies, and as they disappeared into the endless night, Ethan Ward, the man the galaxy thought had vanished, was once again at war. But this time he wasn't fighting for humanity's pride. He was fighting for something far rarer. He was fighting for family. Secrets beneath the storm raged for hours, lightning cutting through the black sky like fire. Ethan's bike struggled against the wind, the engine sputtering as rain turned to dust. He kept his eyes on the horizon, one hand gripping the controls, the other shielding Mira and her child from the flying debris. When the lightning flashed again, he saw it, the faint outline of an old tower rising from the dunes. "Half buried in sand, that's it," he said through the roar of the storm. The outpost, Mira held her son close, her voice trembling. "Will they help us?" Ethan didn't answer, just pressed the throttle harder. They reached the entrance as thunder rolled overhead. The tower's door was rusted, but the metal symbols above it were clear. Human Defense Corps Outpost 49. He banged on the door twice. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a small viewing slit opened and a voice called, "Who's there?" "Ethan Ward," he said. "Open up, Reddick." The slit closed, a long pause followed, and then the heavy door creaked open. Captain Reddick stood there, eyes wide. "Ward, by the stars you're alive," he said, stepping forward. "Barely," Ethan muttered, leading Mira inside. Reddick looked at her and her child, then back at Ethan. So the rumors were true. Inside the outpost, the air smelled of oil, metal, and old machines. There were only a few people, tired faces, survivors, the last of humanity's forgotten soldiers. They stared in silence as Mira passed, her gray skin glowing softly in the dim light. No one said a word, not out of hate but out of disbelief. Reddick guided them to the command room. Screens flickered weakly, maps of the colony glowing red with patrol activity. Ethan stood over one of them, his eyes scanning the flashing dots. "They're expanding," he said quietly. "More bases, more scanners," Reddick nodded grimly. "It's worse than that, Ward. They're not just hunting refugees anymore." He opened a file on the screen. Images appeared, alien refugees, humans, even children, all tagged as biological resources. Mira gasped, her hand covering her mouth. They're experimenting? She whispered. Reddick's voice dropped. The patrols aren't soldiers anymore. They're working for the Syndicate, the ones funding this planet. They're using both species for hybrid programs. Ethan's jaw tightened. Weapons. Exactly, Reddick said. They want soldiers who can survive any world. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Mira spoke softly. My people were taken before. I thought it was war. It wasn't, was it? Ethan looked at her, eyes filled with regret. No, it was harvest. He turned to Reddick. We can't stay here. They'll find this place next. Reddick frowned. You've got a plan, I can see it. Ethan nodded slowly. We hit their main relay station, Sector 12, destroy it, and they lose communication with the other bases. That gives the refugees a chance to escape. Reddick laughed dryly. That's suicide. Ethan smiled faintly. So was everything I ever did that worked. Mira stepped forward, eyes bright with fear and courage. I'll go too. Ethan turned. Surprised. You've done enough. You need to stay with your child. She shook her head. You saved us twice, Ethan. If I can help stop this, I will. My son deserves a world that's free. Ethan studied her face for a long moment, then nodded once. All right, he said quietly. But stay close, Reddick groaned, rubbing his forehead. You two are insane. Fine. I'll give you what I have left. 1 vehicle, 2 rifles, and an old recon drone that barely works, Ethan smirked. Sounds like enough. As the storm outside began to fade, the 3 of them stood before the flickering map. Their next target glowed in red. Relay Station 12. Deep inside enemy territory, Ethan looked at it with calm determination. This isn't about war anymore, he said, his voice low but firm. It's about what it means to be human. Mira looked at him, her faint blue eyes reflecting the red light. And what does it mean? She asked softly. He answered without hesitation. It means we never stop fighting for those who can't. The spark that started it, all smoke filled the sky like storm clouds as the relay station burned behind them. The explosions had stopped, but the echo of battle still lingered across the valley. Ethan Ward stood at the edge of the ridge, his armor cracked, his rifle empty. Beside him, Mira held her son close, her gray skin streaked with dust and tears. The wind carried the smell of burnt metal and freedom. For the first time in years, the patrol's signal towers were silent. No drones, no scanners, no more hunting calls. The Syndicate's control over Terra 3 was gone. At least for now. Reddick limped up the slope, smoke rising from his shoulder plate. You did it, Ward, he said, half laughing, half coughing. You actually did it, Ethan gave a tired smile. We did it. He turned to Mira, who was looking at the horizon where the sun was slowly breaking through the clouds. It's over, she whispered. Ethan shook his head gently. Not yet. But it's a start. Down below, refugees began to emerge from the caves and ruins. Humans, aliens, children of both worlds. They walked carefully, blinking against the sunlight like they hadn't seen it in years. Some looked at Ethan and Mira with awe, whispering their names to them. It wasn't just a victory, it was a miracle. Reddick watched them gather, his voice low. You know what they'll call this, don't you? Ethan raised an eyebrow. What? The day of the Iron Line, Reddick said, smirking. The day humans stood again. Ethan chuckled softly. Let them call it whatever they want. As long as they remember. Mira turned toward him, her voice trembling. Remember what? He looked at her for a moment, then said quietly, that kindness can be louder than war. A silence settled between them, broken only by the sound of the wind. Mira's son tugged at Ethan's hand, holding up a small bent piece of metal. It was part of his old dog tag, the one that read Iron Line. Ethan knelt down, taking it gently. You keep it, he said. It's yours now. The boy smiled shyly, clutching the tag like treasure. Mira wiped her eyes, whispering, You gave him hope. Ethan looked at her, his voice soft. He gave me something to fight for. As the day grew brighter, the survivors began rebuilding the camp. Reddick organized what was left of their weapons, while others cleared debris and Mira helped treat the wounded. Her calm voice steady despite her exhaustion. Ethan moved among them quietly, helping, fixing, lifting, never asking for thanks. Later, as night fell, the sky turned gold and violet. The stars appeared one by one, bright and clear above the silent desert. Mira sat near the fire with her son asleep beside her. Ethan stood a few feet away, staring at the flames, lost in thought. She walked up slowly and said, "You could leave. Start over somewhere." He smiled faintly. "Maybe. But someone has to stay and make sure this doesn't happen again." She looked at him, the firelight reflecting in her eyes. "Then you won't be alone." He met her gaze, surprised but silent. For the first time since the war, he felt something inside him heal, a small, quiet peace. He looked toward the stars and whispered, "If humanity still has a place in the galaxy, maybe it starts here." Mira smiled softly. "And maybe it starts with both of us." Ethan nodded slowly. Watching the fire burn brighter, the storm was over. But the spark they lit tonight would spread far beyond Terrath 3. It would reach colonies and worlds where both humans and aliens would hear one story. Of a mechanic who saved a mother and child. Of an alien who reminded a soldier what compassion meant. And of the day when humanity proved once again that it would never fade into silence. Above the desert a new dawn began, and with it, hope, simple, stubborn, and human, rose once more. The last signal. The desert night was silent except for the low hum of the vehicle. Ethan sat at the front, eyes fixed on the faint red glow on the horizon. Behind him, Reddick checked the weapons while Mira held her child close, her face pale in the moonlight. No one spoke for a long time, the weight of what they were about to do pressing on them like the air before a storm. Finally, Reddick broke the silence. "You ever think we'll make it out of this, Ward?" Ethan didn't look away from the road. "We're not supposed to make it out," he said quietly. "We're supposed to make it count." Mira looked at him, her voice trembling but firm. "It will count." They reached the ridge at dawn, the first rays of sunlight slicing through the clouds below them. Relay Station 12 rose from the ground like a steel tower of nightmares. Dozens of patrol soldiers guarded the perimeter. At the top, a bright pulse of energy surged every few seconds, transmitting signals across the planet. Ethan studied it through his scope, his jaw tightening. "That's the heart of their network," he muttered. "We take that down, the whole system dies?" Reddick grinned faintly. "You always had a taste for impossible missions." Ethan smiled back, but his eyes were distant. "Impossible's the only kind worth doing." They moved at sunrise, crawling through the rocky ridge until they reached the outer fence. Mira kept close, silent but steady, her child hidden safely in the vehicle under Reddick's watch. Ethan cut through the fence with his plasma knife, the sound lost under the wind inside the compound. He motioned for her to stay low. The smell of fuel and metal filled the air. Patrol soldiers marched in lines, unaware of the shadows moving between them. They reached the main power core, a glowing sphere pulsing like a heartbeat. Ethan placed a small charge beneath the console, then another near the data cables. But as he connected the final wire, Mira froze. Her faint blue eyes caught something on the screen, images flashing rapidly. "Ethan." "Look," she whispered. The display showed live feeds from across Terrath 3, human camps, alien prisons, and something else. Massive containers labeled "Transfer to Sector Orion." Ethan frowned. "They're moving people off-world." Mira nodded slowly, her voice shaking. "They're not building weapons here. They're collecting test subjects for something bigger." Ethan's blood ran cold. "This isn't just one planet," he muttered. "It's a network." Before they could act, alarms blared across the station. Red lights flashed and robotic voices shouted, "Intruder detected. Sector C breach." Ethan grabbed Mira's arm. "Go! Get to Reddick!" "What about you?" She cried. "I'll finish this." He shouted back, slamming the control panel. Guards poured into the corridor. Weapons drawn, Ethan ducked behind a wall. Returning fire energy bolts tore through the air, sparks flying as metal burned. He fought like a machine, each shot precise, each movement sharp. He knew he couldn't hold forever, but he didn't need to. Mira ran through the smoke toward the vehicle. Reddick fired from the ridge, covering her, shouting, "Move! Move!" She turned once, seeing Ethan in the distance, surrounded but still standing, still fighting for a second. She wanted to run back, but then she saw him look up, his lips forming the words, "Finish it." She reached the vehicle just as a massive explosion erupted behind her. The entire tower shook, flames rising like a second sunrise. The relay station collapsed in on itself, the signal dying with a long, fading pulse. Silence followed, deep and endless. The syndicate's voice was gone, The hunters had lost their eyes. Reddick looked at Mira, his face pale in the firelight. "He did it," he whispered. "He really did it." Mira held her child close, tears streaming down her face, somewhere inside the flames. Ethan Ward stood against the burning sky, his armor melting, his weapon falling from his hand. He looked toward the horizon one last time, whispering, "Humans don't fade. We endure." And as the relay tower fell, his signal, his last heartbeat, spread across the sky. A message echoing on every free frequency in the system. A message simple but powerful. This world belongs to no empire. This is Earth's promise. We protect those who cannot fight.